Hi, I'm Leanne. I'm a lightworker and a mother to 3 special girls. I strive to continue learning, growing, and to collect new skills. I'm a psychic medium, Reiki master teacher, and Akashic record reader and energy healer. I am so excited to share what I've learned and what I'm going to learn and the ups and downs of life. Thank you for joining me on my journey. Welcome to Life of a Lightworker podcast. Hello, and thank you so much for joining me today. In this episode, I am talking to Ellie McMillan. She is a priestess and the host of the Attune to Your Alchemy podcast. Her work consists of working with women who want to reconnect with their sensuality through ceremony and the sacred arts. She is a Human Design Projector and uses her insight and intuition to coach women through transitional periods in their lives, and is passionate about creating opportunities for adding more pleasure into their lives. And here's the conversation I had with Ellie. Thank you so much for joining me, Ellie. I'm so glad that you have joined me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So first, I would love to get to know you a little bit better and share you with everybody listening. I would like to start with where you grew up and your childhood. Could you share a little bit about that, please?
Sure. I always joke that there's a way that you say the town that I grew up in, because when you're from there, you say it a certain way, and when you're not from there, you pronounce it a different way. And so I actually grew up in a tiny little town of 150 people. Actually, I think at that point, the population was 147. And
Exact.
yeah. And if you're from the area, you say you're from Berwick. But if you're not from the area, you call it Berwick, Ontario. A tiny little town about 45 minutes outside of Ottawa. And the continuous joke is that when I moved away for university, I had more people living in my building than I had living in my small town.
Oh, I get you. I'm from like a hamlet, not even a village.
Yes.
It's a hamlet. And yeah, it's just a tiny farming community. So I get the whole nobody lives here thing.
Yeah,
there was like one stop sign and that was it.
I reminisce around there was another family that had some gals. So they had 4 children. 3 of them were gals. 2 of them were around the same age as me. And the one that was like the closest in age to me was not an aligned individual with me. Let's call her that now that I know what I know. But her older sister was. And they had a pool. And so you played nice and you brought freezies in exchange for like spending the summer in the pool. We were just talking about how hot summers are where we grew up and where we are.
Yes.
And you played nice to be able to have access to that, the community pool, if you will.
Yeah, you're just like, I'll stuff it down. I will,
You can be as mean to me as you want.
Exactly. It's like you can trigger the heck out of me and I'm going to stay cool in the water.
That's exactly. I'll see you on the patio.
It's like, see you later, jerk.
Literally.
Awesome.
She spent most of her time in her bedroom anyway.
Oh, well, there you go. It worked out.
Yeah.
What do you think, when you look back at your childhood, what is your favorite childhood memory? What pops up as being the most fun or joyous for you?
Yeah, this is like here we are talking about small town and farming and whatnot. So at one point in my life, in my early years, we lived on a pig farm. And last year my father passed away, and we have such dear, like, he had such an impact on my brothers and my mom and I that we remember him so fondly. Like, without dismissing the jerk things that he did, of course, because we also reminisce about those things and sometimes cackle about them now. But when we were young, we lived on a pig farm. And not many people live on pig farms. Lots of people in Ontario live on dairy farms or cattle, and depending on what industry you're in. And so we lived on a pig farm, and I remember being put into the feed bin and going around with my dad to each stall to feed the pigs. And I remember the smell of the feed and just the bonding experience that I had with my dad, like such a strange like memory. But this is one that I come back to often. And then as the feed like went down, I started off at the top of the feed bin, and then you would be at the very bottom as the pigs get fed. And in the same place at that same farm, we like, this is small town. Welcome to my small town living. We had a ditch that, and I think to myself, like, I have done a lot of things since this point in my life. I have been a lot of places since this exact point in my life. But we had a ditch that during some parts of the summer would flood, and we would swim in the ditch. This is like, these people understand
Yeah.
how painfully small town this is. And then we would go to my nanny's house, which was my father's mother and father, and we would swim in cow troughs that they would, yeah, they would have one that was not that they had taken in from the barn, but they would put it in the back of the house and fill it with water. And we were so tiny at that point, like such small little kids, that more than one of us could get in the cow trough and like push ourselves to the other the other side. We were just tadpoles.
They're pretty much just bathtubs.
Yes,
Like,
exactly.
yeah, and if there's not anybody drinking out of it at that time, it's clean.
Yeah. I have a lot of early memories on the farm, but we did a lot of things together as a family. Like, my father really included a lot of his endeavors to be a family event. Like, we tapped maple trees, which was so fun to have this continuous fire whenever all of the sap had been collected to boil down the syrup, and then make pancakes. And like, it was good, clean fun, And my father, after being a farmer, was a logger. And so we spent a lot of time in the forest, and to really be there with him, I have fond memories of him telling us about the trees or why the land looked the way that it did. And I jokingly say now, like, he was the first influential witch in my life, and or maybe I should call him a warlock, and my mother as well, as some of the things that she did, to can and to really homestead. But I say this in terms of, we don't realize how much magic we encounter in our everyday life. And so walking through the forest and having him identify trees, or having him, excuse me, say, this is what happened here. I remember him telling me about deer and how they kick up the dirt sometimes whenever they're stomping to get their scent around. And so he would say this, this is where the deer did this, to leave his scent for possibly a mate to come through. And it was so interesting just to live a life that was so nature based. And now we have things like forest schools, because as city kids, as I am now, we desire to get back into nature. And when I was a kid, I didn't desire to get to the city, that's for sure, but I just desired to know more. What else? What else? What else? Yeah, so I have those are lots of fun memories.
Oh, well, well, that's wonderful. I love that. And as a kid, you always want to explore and know more and experience more. That's what we're made to do, right? We're made to question, we're made to like explore, mentally, physically, just learn and then come back to what feels good. So
It was
I was the
interesting
same way.
to see him, my father in particular, my parents, both of them, to see them participate in raising my niece and nephews, and how we got to reflect on how we were raised, because they continued to raise or to participate in rearing my niece and nephews whenever they were with my parents, to like how we were. And so we went to the bush, we went to work every day, and we packed a picnic, and to see how that was still through their eyes, their young eyes at that point. They're not young anymore. My niece just turned 20 something. My goodness. to see how they took pride in having purpose like that. And that's exactly what we were like as kids. Like, I just saw it again through their eyes. So
You're just like, oh, that was me.
that was
Oh, that
me.
was me.
Yeah, and to have that excitement again, I mean, I don't think I ever lost the excitement for going to the bush, because like, who doesn't want to have a picnic in the bush for lunch? But the work in between was the thing that I wasn't excited about.
Well, I think that's pretty normal for a kid.
Yeah, especially
Uh,
teenagers.
yeah, I'm like, that's developmentally appropriate.
Yes, right on target.
Yeah, it's like that's expected. So it sounds like, without knowing it, your childhood was infused with spirituality and magic just through the everyday things. Were your parents aware that they were doing this, or is it just something they naturally did? Do you know?
I've reflected back about this because we grew up agnostic children. Like, we never went to church. I remember going to church with a friend of mine, like to a Christian church, and it was this massive production. And not knowing, like, we didn't have God language, we didn't understand that there was something to fear in that way. Like, that we feared the disappointment of my parents. Like,
Yeah.
that was the worst thing that could happen to us. There was never a talk of like heaven or hell. There was nothing that was like outside of us besides the reflection. And now I know this to be animism, besides the reflection of nature and how we fit into this. And excuse me, how interesting it was to go to this church. And at that point in my life, I wasn't curious necessarily about religion. Excuse me.
Moving lots of energy there.
We are.
Yeah.
I wasn't curious about religion because I just didn't know about it. And I was curious about why this friend in particular that I went to church with, why she was so into going to church. And so I went with her, and it was curious, like, it was this massive church and it was this massive production. And then there was a really big youth section, and everybody ate hot dogs. And I remember innocently thinking to myself, like, a boiled hot dog? Ugh. I could be in the forest right now eating a hot dog cooked on, like, because we ate hot dogs all the time. A hot dog cooked on the fire. Yeah, that's way better than like a boiled hot dog and talking to people who are like, I don't know what they're talking about. So we had there was this reflection of how we interact and coexist with nature, and this give and take with nature. And although there was still the piece of like, man was, in quotations, man was greater than nature, there was still an opportunity to have a coexisting relationship with nature. Meaning, like, we planted to harvest. We didn't plant to allow the crop to, like, we didn't do cover crops at that point. I mean, I'm sure we did do cover crops. We still harvested it. So there was still this reciprocal relationship, but we knew that we were the ones at that point kind of puppeteering it, until things like snowstorms. We were talking about the weather before we started recording. In Ontario, snowstorms were terrible, and we had a couple of winters where things just got shut down where we lived. And what that would look like to be able to come back into the bush, because of course we had some machinery and whatnot that we could go and make ourselves like a winter campsite, because how fun would that be? So there was definitely this like relationship with nature, even though it shifted for me later on in life of how reciprocal it really is. But that was our religion. That was our spirituality. That's what we, the seasons, the lands. And so it wasn't far off for me to have the association later on in life, but I didn't have the words at the time.
Yeah.
I didn't realize what was happening at the time because it wasn't spoken about as what it was.
Right. So it was kind of like the undercurrent. Mm.
It was the undercurrent.
Mm.
Yeah.
And how do you like, so from teenage years onward, how do you feel having that undercurrent be within you from childhood? How do you think that affected you growing up? Like or growing up as becoming an adult?
Yeah, coming of age.
Yeah, what did that look like?
Interestingly enough, a cousin of mine who was not in the farming community, she was on the other side of the family, and that was not the farming side of the family. She had a book on witchcraft. I know.
Love it.
And she was an avid reader. And I would go to her house and just be surrounded by books. And her brother played D&D. And that was also I have never played D&D before. And it was this like but I knew that it was this secret society game. Like you had to be invited in, you know?
Mhm.
And so I got my hands on her witchcraft book. I don't even remember the name of it now. And I remember she also had a book on the Salem witch trials.
Oh, cool.
And so there were these two polarizing books of like, if we practice this, is this what happens? And there is no way we cannot be practicing this. And I remember thinking to myself, okay, there's a current that I can now put my finger on.
Yeah.
Like I can tap into it. And I was super obsessed. I mean, what really goth child was not obsessed with the cult? The occult, excuse me.
Yes. You got to clarify a little bit.
Yeah. with you know, growing up, how I was obsessed with finding paranormal things. And interestingly enough, I cannot watch a horror movie. It is like it's a no-go for me. My nervous system, yes, same. My nervous
Yeah.
system cannot handle it. I jokingly say that Nemo is scary enough. Like when he loses his dad, no,
As when
heart-wrenching.
when you're empathic, you feel what they're feeling, and
Mhm.
you have to be careful of like, well, do I want to feel like that character? Do I want
Yeah.
to feel like that movie? How long does that go through the
Oh
movie?
gosh.
Like, I like happy endings for
Yes.
movies so that like I can go about my day and not have to like energetically clear myself after a movie. Like that's just too much work for something fun.
It is for something fun, exactly. Too much work for something fun. That is exactly why I don't watch a horror movie. And I can't, but the occult and the paranormal never scared me.
Yeah.
Sometimes it kind of, you know, made me think like, I don't know if I want to dabble in that, but it never scared me.
You're
And
cautious.
yeah, I was cautious. That's a good word for this. I was definitely, you know, curiously cautious. And so I had read these books and I thought to myself, like, does nobody else, like, should we be talking about this to people? What are we doing here? Like, where do we find more of us? And it took me a long time to find more of us because I went through college, and university sort of steers you away from, you know, higher education in a lot of ways, steers you away from anything that is thinking for yourself. I mean, I can get on my high horse about this for as long as possible.
They want you to think with your brain, but in a specific way that they're telling you how to use it. You don't listen with your body. You don't use your own brain the way it's meant to be. You just have to like program your brain to process like they process.
Exactly. And I remember the first year in university, I got massive headaches for months. Like I started school in September, and my headaches probably started in October. And we thought, is it allergies? Is it this? Is it that? Basically, it was unidentifiable headaches. And I think back now, I know exactly what those headaches were. They were just like a cry to get GTFO of there so that I could not continue the path that I was on, but I was determined. I was determined to continue that path, you know?
You're like, you decided and you're like, well, I'm stubborn. I'm doing
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. This is what you do. You know, in a lot of ways, I think back to, I have such tenderness to my younger self for thinking a couple of things of like, there's no other option. Like, you go to university and you graduate university. Like, this is just what you do. My little brother really broke that path, but my older brother and I, we forged ahead. We forged ahead. And so in university, though, I did find a small amount of people that were a little left of center, if you will. And that's what really propelled me, because later on in my high school years, got on this winding road with me. Later on in my high school years, I found punk music, and that I was like, you guys. Yes, fuck the patriarchy. Yes, fuck the state. Yes, feminism. Although things have swung which way and the other since then, but in my youth, I really needed that radical take a stand kind of upbringing. And I think that's sort of what spirituality does for you in some ways, is that it gives you a purpose.
Yeah. It helps you hold on to your power and like recognize your own strength.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
you feel, it's an empowerment. Like when you listen to that kind of music, when you like are in those kind of around those kind of people, they're more encouraging of like you being like, fuck yeah, like standing up for your own and just like going against the grain. And that's a lot of like this spirituality, this new age, all that stuff. It's coming into your own, finding your inner strength. It's just being projected as a different, expressed differently.
Yeah, they're definitely parallel paths. And I mean, I have not let go, if you will, of all of my punk youth. I have a dog currently named Ruby Soho, which is the name of a very famous song by a punk band called Rancid.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah.
I love it.
I mean, they still come with me wherever I go.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, having that purpose and having that direction and understanding that that's what witchcraft in a lot of ways was for me originally, was following the path that was a little different than religion, because I think in a lot of ways, unless you have an influence in life, like I had neither an influence overtly in spirituality or in religion.
Mm-hmm.
I just had this middle ground that was agnostic, And excuse me, I remember going to the baptism of my niece, and my sister-in-law said to me, I just feel better doing this. And at that moment in time, I was like, what are we doing? Like, what are we doing that you're going to feel better about? Like, because we didn't have the fear of God put into us at all.
Was the baby's dad, did he grow up religious or anything like that?
No, my brother, neither of us. And my brother is just sort of a go along kind of guy. Like if his wife wanted to baptize the baby, then great.
Yeah, and she grew up religious?
No, this is the thing.
This is nothing. Okay, so it's just out of nowhere. That is weird.
Yeah.
Like weird.
She wasn't practicing. I don't think they've been to church since, honestly. I don't think they've been to, maybe for a wedding.
Yeah. Oh, weird.
I don't think they've been to church since.
I grew up quite religious. So it's very strange to me that even the church would let people who have no real background or aren't dedicated to it to do that, because that part feels weird to me, because we had to jump through so many hoops to get our kids baptized.
Christian or Catholic?
Oh no, it's Christian. It's a type of Protestant Lutheran. That's what I grew up with, and I only got them baptized because my parents were like so stressed about it, and it's basically to ease their minds.
Just makes them feel better.
And I hadn't really stepped into this path that much, really. It was 7 years ago. I was like, sure, I'll do this. I didn't care at the moment. And I was basically just for my parents to ease their mind.
This would have been a Protestant church as well, a Protestant church. But I think a lot of, I mean, we can get into a deeper discussion about this, but probably the Protestant churches around our small town are really hurting for fellowship, if you will.
So they're just
And
grabbing what they can.
therefore, welcome your children.
Mm.
Welcome everybody, like we want more people to follow the path of God. And therefore, if you want to baptize your child, then yes. Now, I don't know if they got invitations or whatnot, like if there was a follow-up sequence to the baptism.
Right.
But that was also 20 years ago now.
Right.
So yeah, no, I remember. So that might have been the last time. That may have been the last time that I was in a church that wasn't for a punk show. Because punk shows in Ottawa, Ontario were often held in the basement of a church.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yes.
Well, some churches are kind of just like, oh, you can rent it out. I don't really care what you're doing.
Yeah.
Because I have a friend whose friend does sound healing sessions in the basement of a church.
I taught yoga in the basement of church at one point.
Yeah, I did. It just doesn't. From how I grew up and having it be very strict and very like this is the way and kind of non-accepting of outside things, it feels very strange to me that those worlds can coexist. Because to me, they feel so separate. And I love how some places it blends together a little bit better. I really like that, but in my brain, it doesn't.
Yeah, doesn't compute.
It doesn't compute. I don't understand. I haven't experienced that yet.
Yes.
That's all.
I'll take you to a punk show in a church.
All right. Sounds good. Yeah. And so from when you were early 20s, moving on after university, when do you feel that you really kind of, or I should say, was your journey to become who you are now? Was it slow? Did it trickle in? Or was there a moment that was like, bam, I'm diving into this.
I've come to Jesus.
Yeah, like I'm getting it. Like this is, hand me the tarot cards, hand me this. This is me. You just fully embraced it. What was that like?
Interestingly enough, I had a girlfriend who had a deck of tarot cards. Oh my gosh, I had a girlfriend in high school. She somehow was a city girl and moved to our tiny little town. So we now had 100 and I guess 50 because it was her stepfather, her mother, and her that moved to our tiny town. And she had a deck of tarot cards, and they may have been an elder in her family, if you will. And I remember her trying to explain the concept of tarot to me, and my brain not understanding, because I did not have a religious background and spirituality wasn't spoken about as spirituality. I had the hardest time comprehending what cards, how they could tell us nuggets that we would need to know about in order to unfold our life's path. And I remember her being enamored with the magic of it, but also not understanding, because even though I had read that witchcraft book, there was not necessarily a mention of, there was definitely a mention of like tools that you would use and spell casting and ways that in which you would live your life through ritual, but overtly tarot was not spoken about. And I remember her saying to her, like, oh my gosh, like, is this like a seance? Like, what do we do? How do we go here? And so she read my cards, and from that moment on, I was like, we're done. We're done here. Like, this is a part of my life. And so I would go to her often, excuse me, for her to read my cards. And then my roommate in university also had a deck of tarot cards, because I also was like, where did you buy these things? Like, it never occurred to me, because these were passed down, that you would go to the store, the small town mentality. where do you get these things?
It's like, do you have to make them?
Yeah, like the magic, like the tooth fairy, and magically they just appear underneath on your bedside table on your altar one day. So one of my roommates in university, excuse me, who is still a very, very dear friend of mine, she had a deck of tarot cards, and I remember being like, "Oh, can I use these?" And she was like, "Of course, like let's do a spread, you know?" And then I found out about, because at this point in time in my life, metaphysical stores were not a conversation in everyday vernacular. If we think back to this time in my life, like I was heavy into the punk scene, and so capitalism was not smiled upon, if you will.
Right.
And so we didn't talk a lot about where to buy things. And I look back and giggle to myself of like how small and tight-knit my community was. And I continued to live this very small life because that's what I did in my small town. And so I found a metaphysical store in Ottawa. And I went in there, and you know the smell of a metaphysical store, like the smell of incense mixed with leather and like dust.
Yep.
I walked in there, and it was like my hair blew back, and I was like, I have arrived. I am finally here. And I spent a lot of time in those books. And in that store, excuse me, I remember reading Sylvia Browne. Do you know who Sylvia Browne is?
Of course.
Yes. Because Sylvia Browne used to be on Montel Williams. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm talking about this right now.
Yeah.
Sylvia Browne used to be on Montel Williams, and I was obsessed with her books. I also, when I moved to Vancouver, there was like a free library in the basement of the building, and there was Sylvia Browne books, and I ate those up. I just like sped through them. And in one of her books, she predicted the whole pandy aspect, and it stuck with me. And so when we were going through it, I was like, great, this is just part of how the world unfolds right now. So Sylvia Browne knows, okay, people. And then I started going through, when I went to that store, of course, I had access to more information about workshops that were going on. And so it sort of unfolded like that. But I was just reminiscing with a friend of mine that I think the very first crystal that I bought wasn't until I took my yoga teacher training when I was living out here in Vancouver, which would probably be around the age of 29. And when somebody explained to me what the crystal was and how to use them, that was the next level of like tarot first, crystals second. Then we just blew the doors off of everything. And I was just obsessed. And still I have, there's 6 crystals right here on my desk and directly in yeah, exactly.
I have them like literally all around my workstation. I have them all over my computer. Yes.
Yeah. All over this room.
Same. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yes, I see. I saw that
in my background.
Too.
Oh, they're surrounding me.
Yes.
Anyways, go ahead.
And I remember one of my partner at the time, one of her friends, 2 of her friends were this couple that one was a math teacher and one was a science teacher. And the math teacher actually was a trained geologist. And I remember her, when she knew that I was in yoga teacher training, I don't even know, maybe I had a twinkle in my eye. She brings me this box of rocks and she's like, "Do you believe in their magical properties?" And I was like, "Yes." I believe in nothing else besides their magical properties, just so we're clear. And so she showed me some opals that she had in water from Australia. And she said, "I feel that every time I touch these, I get bad luck, but I can't release them back into the ocean because I'm no longer there." And I was like, well, we can do things about that, number one. And number 2, she had some tragedy after that we then came and comforted her about. And their cat passed away shortly after that. And I was like, I didn't think anything of it. And she was like, "Is it the opals?" I was like, we have to clear the energy of those opals, people. So yeah, I took my yoga teacher training, and that, I think for me, I had these little stepping stones, and the yoga teacher training just blew the doors off of everything and was like, this enter into the world
Mm-hmm.
that you have been walking the path of without knowing it.
Yes.
And that was a turning moment in my life, because we had people in the training that came from all different backgrounds.
Mm.
And it wasn't just the physical practice. I mean, the yoga, the teacher training that I took was a tantric yoga teacher training. And so, yeah, and exactly.
Mm.
Which leads me to the work that I do today, essentially.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, just understanding it, and the yoga, the tantric path of yoga, at this point in time, it was called Anusara. It's still called Anusara. And at this point in time, it was really this, like, how do we weave everything we do into a practice of yoga? Like, how is yoga life? And what does yoga even mean? And so I spent a long time contemplating these things and teaching classes on it.
I love that. It's like,
Yeah.
this isn't just like moving your body. This is like, how do we integrate these things into your life, which I think is so important for any spiritual woo-woo, whatever you do, is how do you take that concept? How do you take that and weave it into your life? And it doesn't have to look exactly the same, but the backbone, the energy behind it is what stays. And like, because it's hard to take something really etheric and bring it into the physical. And being okay that it can be a little bit different as long as it has that same energy. But like, anyways, just going off on a tangent. But
yeah, I'm there.
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah. I used to teach teacher trainings. And the curious part about the teacher training is that I would say to my students, you know, like, you can teach like, by the end of this training, you're going to teach a damn good yoga class. I will give you the recipe so that your students will come back every week because you can teach them the physical poses that are going to be excellent. But what is going to create students that want to expand, that want to go further, that want to, you know, I always said that if my job, my work as a yoga teacher was to teach myself out of a job, because I had better teachers than me now. And excuse me, the way that you did that was through weaving the etheric into the manifest. And we do that through this concept of theming.
I love it.
Yeah, I can go to a calisthenics class anywhere. I you know, and some teachers just teach calisthenics, and that's fine. Like, that's the purpose of that class. But give me some juice.
Yeah. There's a teacher for every person. Whatever you feel drawn to, whatever you feel comfortable with, that you want to explore, there's somebody that's offering that. But you know, you get to a certain point, well, you and me, where like you want to infuse your soul into your activities. Otherwise, it feels kind of empty.
Exactly.
So,
So the doors got blown off, and I was in. I paid the membership. I got the t-shirt.
you're just like, give me all the
found the
merch.
staff.
Yeah.
Give me all the merch, exactly. And I'm still buying merch as of today.
Well, it's the best.
Yeah.
You're like, makes you feel good. You're like, yeah, put it on my body.
A new crystal. Ooh.
Yeah, I just bought this one on the weekend. It's malachite.
So I went to California for one of my trainings. And I haven't had malachite. So the first year that I did my yoga teacher training, I purchased malachite, and it was so charged that I literally couldn't handle it and had to give it away.
It's powerful. Yeah.
It's so powerful. And so I stopped in Mount Shasta, California. Do you know Mount Shasta?
I know of it. Never been there, but yeah, I know of it.
Just bedrock. The bedrock there is just all crystals. I stayed with a friend of mine in Shasta, and she had mined, if you will, some obsidian, and she gave me this massive chunk of obsidian that they had mined on Halloween earlier that year. But I went in specifically. I was like, I need a piece of malachite, and it's in the shape of a heart.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, it's a raw piece in the shape of a heart.
Oh.
And I also love, like, when you're open to the idea of spirituality, when you just like open the channel. The woman that was at the store, so this is in California, asked me where I was from, and I said I was going up north to Canada. And she said, "Oh, my family used to live in Canada at one point." And I said, "Oh, curious. Wow." And she said, "Yeah, they lived in White Rock, BC." And I said, "That's where I live."
Yeah.
Because then I moved my parents from North Vancouver to White Rock, and I said, "Oh wow, that's insane." And I said, "I'm there. My love has a construction business." And she said, "I used to work in the construction industry. What business is it?" I said, "Well, we're a brand new industry, but she is a tower crane operator." And there was just so many synchronicities that had happened going into uh, the crystal store there's a couple of crystal stores in Mount Shasta, and I was like, I am just meant to be here. I'm actually meant to come back.
Yeah, you're like the synchronicities. You're like, there's just too many. There's just too many. Like,
Too many.
oh, you're like, that is not a coincidence. So, what a cute puppy.
Yeah, we have a special guest
Oh,
that's going to join us for the rest of the.
I shut my doors and all my cats are on the other side. So, yeah.
For cats, you have to be like, you have to accept the fact that they're going to be all over your screen. They're going to be all over your keyboard. They're going to be all over any paperwork that you have. They're going to be knocking things off, potentially the desk. And this guy can't jump this high.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
why he needs to be picked up. For anybody who can't see us right now, my Chihuahua, I have 4 pups, and my Chihuahua, actually he's called a Chiweenie. He's a Chihuahua and Dachshund mix.
Oh, he's so
Which
cute.
is the worst of both dogs
Species.
in him.
You're like, oh, it got that mix.
Yeah. Like, head of security, he's 7 foot tall when he comes into a room, but he's 7 pounds.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah, but also quite a lover. So
I love it when dogs have a different color eyebrow. Reminds me of my dog when I was little, and I'm just like, oh,
very
you still
expressive.
my heart. Yeah.
You're the worst. The worst.
I would love to hear what offers you're bringing out into the world. Tell me about your business and what you're sharing and how your light is shining.
Yeah, thank you. So, shining my light over here. So, interestingly enough, when we go from the tantric principles of yoga, this brought me into the work that I do now, which is the focus is on intimacy, sacred pleasure, sensuality with women in the world. And I think one of the biggest things that we are missing is our lives as women is this connection. Like, I've spent my whole life walking a parallel line that my purpose now is to connect things. So creating these connections with the pleasure that we have the capacity to experience in our life, and the joy that we feel, and the openness of intimacy that we can experience with our partners or just in life with ourselves. And so creating all of these connections, I have a program that is called Magnetic, and it's really creating ceremony. And the work that I do now is all about ceremony and ritual as part of the 13 Moon Mystery School that I am currently in, to become an ordained priestess. The curiosity here is really, how can we expand our capacity for sensuality and for pleasure and for so many things when we feel overwhelmed in life. And part of this is understanding the divine masculine and feminine energetics. And so I teach a lot about that. And also understanding how we can add more pleasure into our lives through ceremony and through ritual and through coming to a temple and having these experiences, and how they really change the way that we create. And I think, as I talk about my story as I grew up, there was this, I never liked the term seeker. And when you become a yogi, that you're often called a seeker, like in texts and whatnot, this terminology is seeker. And I remember thinking to myself, like, no, not me. But we really are seeking this weave or this flow or this association. And so, as we mature as women, we understand better that we are seeking deeper intimacy, and what gets in the way is laundry.
Mm-hmm.
So on July 18th, I'm going to do a free workshop called Divine Ecstasy. And this is all about the energetics between masculine and feminine and understanding how this plays out in our relationships and our lives, and how we can change and create this new foundation of energy for us to really sit in. Because as women, we are go, go, go. We are doing all of the things, and we are in our masculine energy most of the time.
Yeah.
So how can we sit back to receive and continue to have this connection with something higher that actually is the greater version of ourselves?
Mm.
So that's Divine Ecstasy. Let's come back to Magnetic is one of my signature programs, and we go into the ceremony and ritual around pleasure, around the sacredness of it. And what I have found in talking to so many women about sex, sensuality, relationships, is that we're just taught through Disney that we marry and it's happily ever after.
Oh,
It
yep.
is not happily ever after. We actually have to create that happily ever after.
Yeah, it doesn't just unfold naturally.
No, we don't just
and
put the slipper on and then all of a
yeah,
sudden.
yes, it's just, yeah, there's so many people, they're like, oh, when it's right, it should just be easy. Well, easy in the sense that you want to work on it. It's not a chore to work on it, it's something you dread working on it. You have to work on it. You want to work on it, but everything needs work. Everything takes effort, but you want to put that effort in. That's the difference between, a good fit. For me, that's what I feel anyways. But yeah, that Disney thing, I'm just like, that really, really messed our whole generation. Really.
Yeah, it totally messed us up. Yeah, so Magnetic, the doors for Magnetic will be open. I also run a podcast called Attune to Your Alchemy, and you are coming out on a podcast with me as well. It's very exciting.
Yeah, I'll be on shortly.
Yes. And so that I talk a lot about this whole 13 moon archetypes. I talk about the idea of understanding ourselves through the reflection of archetypal and alchemist living, and how we can really be the drivers and the passenger at the same time of our lives, instead of sometimes being a victim. Like I've been through this myself, being a victim, because we now have greater connection to something and understanding to something outside of us. And this is spirituality, essentially.
Yeah. Well,
and we have, for women, for years, not even years, like for eons, have been taught that our original sin is existence, and that we are the individuals who messed it up for everybody else.
I have so many issues with that. Anyways, I won't go into. I'm just like, it's so, there's like whitewash. It's like same thing. It's like it's been curated and moved to be a certain direction of what the 1%, the men in charge, wanted it to be, not necessarily what is best for us. And I like that a lot of us are becoming aware of this and going against the grain, because that grain is wrong. So wrong.
That narrative is very wrong. And it's very against animism. It's very against nature and the flow of nature. And so a lot of this is focused on the matriarch of the family. Like, as the woman in the family, you are the matriarch. And how you create the path and the winding road that your family goes on when you embody that that role. And we're in the ceremony in magnetic, we are unpacking all of the years, whether we experienced it like me and not having a direct relationship with religion, and knowing, like, of course I'm not wrong, because no one ever told me that I was wrong, but society did. Subtly, society has. I didn't need.
You watch TV.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's there.
It's there. You do anything. You read a book, it's there. You go to the gas station, it's there. And so this is unpacking a lot of those things to create shifts in your life, that you literally become the magnet as the embodied divine feminine for everything that you desire in life. Oh my gosh.
I love that. I love that. Yes. All that unpacking. And I would assume, I feel like there a lot of people would go into that program, and through listening to you and talking to other people, you uncover all these things about yourself that you didn't even think were even an issue, in quotes, or weren't even something that you recognize as being part of programming, and not a natural part of yourself that's just been like conditioned. And unpacking all of that and all the discoveries and all the layers that are shed, I think it'd be really beautiful.
It's like, there's a reason it's my signature program.
It's close to your heart.
Yes, it is. It definitely is.
And so for timelines, you said, so magnetic launches on the 18th, which is when this podcast comes out, but you're also doing a free masterclass for the divine ecstasy on that day as well?
Yeah, so magnetic launches after the masterclass. So if you're listening to this and you have any interest, come on over to my website and you can sign up for the replay. I'll probably do an encore within a few days, because I have two very specific Eastern and Western time zones, Eastern and Pacific. And you can come on over and you can get the replay, and then you can also check out magnetic if this is something that piques your interest. Find me on Instagram as well. Divine ecstasy is going to be a great basis for understanding how we work as the matriarch, and how we receive pleasure and ecstasy in our lives.
I love that. And I'll have all your links in the notes so people can just like click and don't have to think or search. That's all taken care of.
Wonderful.
And I would love to ask you, so when you look back at yourself when you were 15, 20, 25, you pick the age, what would you say to them now? So what advice would you give somebody who was like you at one of those ages?
Yeah, the first thing that always comes to mind when I think back to my younger self is, oh, sweet child. Like, we're such an awkward duckling, you know? We're flailing through life and trying to find the ground that we stand on. And that felt painful at some points in my life, but also it was needed to have a sturdy ground later on. And so my words would just really be like, oh, sweet child, come closer. In archetypal work, we have an archetype called the Great Mother. And one of the things that she says is like, there's nothing that you can do to make me love you, but there's nothing that you can do to make me not love you. And that's really what I would say to her as well.
Yeah, you're just loved. There's nothing you need to do. Yeah.
That's it.
True unconditional love.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. And who do you look up to, either spiritually or personally or professionally? Is there somebody that you look up to who embodies something that inspires you?
Yeah, there are a few people. Oh, you know what? I want to talk about one of my besties. My spiritual besties. Her name is Clodagh O'Connor. And she has a great Instagram, and we do priestess work together. And one of the things that I really admire about her is that she has a love of Jesus like I have never seen in anybody else. It is a non-religious love of Jesus, and it's pure. It is absolutely pure. And she's somebody who she also is like a prayer priestess. Like they just flow out of her.
Mm.
And she was the very first person that said to me, I'll pray for you. And I didn't have the instant reaction of like, there is nothing that is wrong with me that needs to be prayed away.
Mm.
She said, I'll pray for you. And I said, please do. Because it really shifted the mindset that I had around fearing the religious side of Jesus and understanding that there's a pure channel that happens. And so she's definitely somebody that I look up to. There's a lot of priestesses in the school. If anybody's interested in priestess work, the school that I'm part of is the Priestess Presence School, and we work in the 13 Moon Mystery School. One of the head focalizers there, her name is Elsa Alegria, and she just is pure fierceness packed into this 4'11" body. Just she is like my pup, who is 7 pounds and 7 feet tall when he walks into a room. She knows how to really have presence. And I think that is something that is really admirable because she is so aligned in exactly who she is. And so those are two. Anybody really from the Priestess Presence community has a quality that I'm just like, wow, we have come so far. We have come so far.
Oh, I love that. I love that. I love that your teacher has that like presence. That's really something that I've been working on because, childhood onward, you're told to be small, you're told to, whatnot. And I love that. And I love that you have somebody so close in your life that can be such a shining example of what you could be. I love that so much.
Yeah, I think one of the things that really has influenced me is always looking. I call this looking for the helpers. This is something that Mr. Rogers coined in our childhood. And we look for the helpers. And I have always been somebody who's looked for the helpers because I have desired strong influence. I adore my mother. Her influence and like all-encompassing love in our family is so warming. It's so warming. And I'm so lucky to have a really solid direct influence in my life like that. I know that a lot of people don't have great relationships with their mother, and I'm so thankful that I do. And teenagehood was rocky, but I was finding my way, and so was she. She finding her way as a mother of a teenager who was very rebellious. And I've always looked for people who who could really hold me when I felt like I wasn't ready to hold myself.
I love that. And I bet now that you're like teaching and holding space, you're holding other people who aren't ready to hold themselves yet. So the roles have reversed.
This is exactly what ceremony is that it just is this beautiful container.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for joining me. And I've had a wonderful conversation. I've really enjoyed it. I loved learning more about you and your business and your programs. It's really wonderful. And yeah, thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It was great to talk.